Thanks for joining our latest speaker series. We are going to be talking about how to manage back to school stress. We know a lot of you, your families and your kids are already back in school. So hopefully this gives you some pointers and directions as you navigate the next steps. My name is Megan and I'm the marketing director at Gold Crown Foundation. And I am also one of our Health Huddle program coordinators on staff. And today I'm going to be having a conversation with Dr. Jenna Glover. She's a licensed psychologist and associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Colorado School of Medicine. And she also serves as the director of psychology training at Children's Hospital, Colorado. So there's a lot of good information for you today. Dr. Glover, I'll turn it over to you to expand a little bit more, and then we'll get into some of the questions.
Yeah, so glad to be here today. And so my background is working with children and teenagers, primarily those who have anxiety and depression, but work with kind of all of a range of things. And then I also specialize in working with kids who have self-injury or suicidal ideation. So I've been working in kids in school, in hospitals, and residential facilities over the last 15 years, and happy to be here today.
Great, thank you. So we'll get started just with a couple of basic questions, but I know routines are a big thing when it comes to getting back to school. Do you have any tips on how to go transition from being a summer routine to a school routine in forms of, sleep, homework, all of that?
Yeah, so kids thrive on routines. That's why this last year was so hard, is because it was very difficult to have routines with the ever-changing school schedules. So to the extent possible, I encourage families to have consistent routines for core areas. So for sleep, making sure that you have a consistent bedtime for all of your kids, making sure that bedtime is early enough for them to get the recommended hours of sleep in. Most people underestimate the number of hours their kids need for sleep. If kids are ages 6 to 12, they're going to need 9 to 12 hours of sleep a night. For kids 13 and older, they need 8 to 10 hours of sleep. For teenagers, really, we want them to have 9 or 10 hours of sleep. So really thinking about this is kind of the stop time so they can wind down, have a bedtime routine, get in bed so they get enough sleep, and then have that consistent wake up time. I know that we all value our weekends and being able to sleep in, but the more consistent you can keep the sleep schedule of bedtimes and wake up times on the weekend, the better that is going to be for your kids. Having a good routine related to breakfast. I know breakfast is a crazy time, but kids getting out of the house with at least something in their stomachs is so important for helping them just like manage their day and be at their best for learning. And then the expectation of having some time where it's dedicated to homework. So when kids come home, that they have a specific routine, and maybe that's I have a snack and then immediately we are at the kitchen table and we're doing homework, and we have a certain amount of time that we do that for before different activities can come out. So letting your kids know about those things, holding to those routines is so important. Being prepared and having some flexible routines. So I know we all hope that we're going to stay in person, but we need to radically accept that we don't know what's going to happen. And so having a routine that if a school does go remote, or if a school goes hybrid, or for some of you, you are going to be in remote learning, just having different schedules. So in case things change, your kids know exactly what the schedule is, and there's still sleep and wake times. We're going to still be doing meals. We're still doing homework at these times, is going to be a really helpful thing. And then finally, if you've already started school or you're about to start school, if your kid's bedtime is then 3 hours later than it needs to be, it's a very hard adjustment to bring kids 3 hours back. So just work on a goal of trying to, in increments, bring the bedtime 30 minutes up each night until you get to where you need to be. So don't do it all at once. It's a recipe for power struggle and disaster. So be patient with yourself. If you do know already, I need to adjust that bedtime, do it in those increments.
They're great tips. Thank you. Kind of on a similar note, this is a big year of transition. So not only from just going from remote learning into the classroom, or a lot of kids will be going from elementary school to middle school. So that's a whole different format. As far as just transitioning goes, do you have any tips to help prepare them for that or calm them if they're having a hard time adjusting after this first week?
Yeah. So it is always normal for anxiety and stress to accompany periods of transition for children. The larger the transition, typically the higher the levels of stress and anxiety. So if you're seeing that, it's completely normal, and we would expect that. So I think having conversations with your kids and helping them in kind of the main areas, especially if your kids are making a big transition from elementary to middle school or junior high, there's the research shows there's kind of 3 areas that kids really, really worry about. The first is logistics. So I'm moving from a much smaller environment to a much larger one. So being able to have conversations with your kids of this is how many classes you have, being able to get into the school, see where those things are, help walk them through the transitions, how long transitions are going to take, what books they need to take to what classes, practicing at home with locks so they know how to undo a locker. All of those things can be helpful. Even if your kid has started school, going through some of these things and talking through them and debriefing about them each day, the logistic piece can be really, really helpful. The second piece is social. So kids really worry, I'm in a different school, I might not have the same friends, or I might not have classes with my friends. So a couple of things, try to really encourage your kids to get involved in extracurriculars, in sports, in different clubs. Those are more targeted areas where it's going to be much easier to develop friendships based on shared interest. Secondly, in the first couple of weeks of school, schedule some out time, social time that has nothing to do with school. So if you're, your neighborhood, think about doing like play dates with friends. If you're part of a church group, maybe doing a social function with that. But those things can be very helpful that are not related to school, that if a child is feeling lonely, they're still able to connect. Or if they have elementary friends that they're not currently seeing, being able to get in touch with them. So schedule those extra social activities. And then finally, just talk to your kids about how to be a good friend, how to start conversations. So, sometimes we will practice with our kids. This is how you introduce yourself. What are good conversation starters? What did you do on vacation? What do you like to eat? What classes do you have this year? And just having those conversation starter practice sessions with your kids can help give them confidence of this is how I can start and initiate a conversation with someone else.
That's great. I can see that at the dinner table too, especially like here, let's practice talking to the person you're sitting next to today or something like that. So that's great. I know you mentioned this kind of on number 2 is to motivate them to get involved in sports or music or art or whatever their interest is. I know this last year, a lot of kids are used to being more isolated. So they're having a hard time trying to stay, like wanting to motivate themselves to join. Do you have any tips for parents on how not to be too pushy, but keep encouraging them to try again?
Yeah, so give your kids a menu of options and let them guide. So you structure it up, but don't force them to do something. So out of these 3 or 4 activities, which one would you like to try? And then being able to give them information on what it means to try. So you would have to do this mini practices and we would go to games and this is what this would look like. So talk through them about those things. Also, if you can connect them to 1 or 2 kids who are doing that activity and being able to have that social connection. So starting in a smaller way that feels, we call them kind of bite-sized exposures, can be incredibly helpful for kids. And thinking about like, if you know that your kid is very overwhelmed, is there an activity that's maybe just like a 1 or 2 time, so a cooking class, it's a one-time drop-in. That's a nice way to expose a kid to, let's just try this. And then they have the success of, I was really anxious, but I got in there and it ended up being really fun. Sometimes kids are able to commit to those one-off activities without feeling as overwhelmed. And then as they gain some success and some social confidence, they'll be willing to try activities that maybe there's a commitment that you're going to be doing this for 3 or 4 months, once a week, going to these practices.
Okay. Kind of make it seem like it's their choice, picking what they want to do instead of
give them some sense of control.
Yeah, that's great. So the never-ending mask debate, I know we don't want to get in it too much, but the reality of the situation is at school this year, some districts are requiring them, some it's optional. What would you tell the kids that their parents want them to wear a mask, but there's only 5 kids in their class wearing a mask and other kids aren't? Just any ideas to help them navigate through that decision?
Yes.
Not decision, but just being in that situation, I guess.
Yeah, this is definitely a tough one because it can feel very charged emotionally. So I think first of all, starting out and just having the conversation. So your kids are really clear, why are you wearing a mask? and being able to explain, depending on the age of your kid, in a developmentally understandable way, this is why we're wearing masks. We know that masks help slow the spread of COVID-19. Masks keep other people safe. So that's something we can do to help our community, to help our friends, to help our school, is we're going to wear a mask to keep them safe. It also provides us some protection, but for us, we're going to do this because we care about other people. Other people choose to protect each other in different ways. This is the way we think is most helpful. Some people will disagree with us, and if they do, that's okay. Disagreements happen, but we think this is important. So being able to acknowledge that other kids might disagree with you, that's neither good nor bad. We don't have judgment. We just are at a different place. It's a real chance to teach your kid diplomacy, which is a skill that's very lacking in our society. It's easy to say, oh, there's a bunch of jerks because they're not doing what I'm doing. And instead it's, look, this is why we're doing what we're doing. Other people might not, and we give them freedom to do that, but this is what we choose to do. So, and then also just like talking to your kids about like, if somebody says something to you, how do you want to respond to that? And again, really like, it's the same if like a kid was being bullied. We want kids to just be like very neutral, kind of ignore those things. And if they get to the place of where they are being bullied, talk to adults about it. And then finally, just debrief with your kids, ask them like how things are going during the first few weeks when masks are being worn by some people and not by others, how they're going, how they're feeling about that. Give them a lot of praise that they're doing this, that you are proud of them, that you appreciate them making this effort to keep the community safe, to keep your family safe. And then finally, you know, you got to put your your mask where your mouth is. So, you know, there are many adults who are vaccinated, your kids are not. And so you might be able to say, I'm not going to wear a mask. But if you really want your kids to wear a mask, you need to mask up even in spaces where maybe it's been said you don't need one. I know the rules are always changing around this, but wear your mask, even if you feel like you're in a situation you don't need to, because you're asking your kids to do the same thing. So lead by example.
Okay. Thanks. Kind of piggybacking on some things parents can be doing. I know we kind of talked about the mask situation could be sensitive, but as a parent, if you're pretty, you know, charged up about how school is handling it, how do you still let your child know that school is a safe place to go and a good place for them to be right now, and not let your emotions kind of taint their learning experience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this happens, right? There's large organizations, you might be frustrated with the school. So first of all, it's completely valid for parents to feel frustrated, especially if they feel like schools are making decisions that don't make sense to them. Talk to your friends about it, talk to your significant other about it as a first place, so you can work out and process those feelings. You don't have to shove them down. You should have support, and having your kids hear those things is not going to be helpful to them enjoying their school experience. So get support outside of your kids about talking about these things. Be really aware about the language you're using when you are talking about these things. A lot of times kids hear things peripherally that we think they have no idea that we're hearing. I mean, I have a 3.5-year-old and I'm amazed sometimes at the things that he picks up when I think that he's not paying attention at all. So when you are talking about the school, use really objective terms. So again, it's easy to say like, people are idiots or they're a bunch of jerks. Instead, you can talk about, you know, I feel frustrated that this wasn't more clearly communicated. I'm disappointed that that's the decision that's made. And you can still have a great time at school. This is called a dialectic. Two opposites can be true. Somebody can do something that you really, really hate, and you can also love that person. So get rid of the word but in your language with your kids. When you're talking about something you have complicated feelings, these are maybe some of my complicated feelings, and you can still go, and there are all these great things that the school has to offer. So just have that balance, give yourself the space, talk objectively about it, and don't use the word but, use the word and.
Okay. Also, as a parent, you could be pretty stressed out about how the school is handling health and safety measures. So before we get into kind of anxiety with kids, I guess the last question for parents is just any tips for managing their own anxiety if they don't feel like their kid is protected at school.
Yeah. I really recommend radical acceptance is important, which is acknowledging reality for what it is. Doesn't mean you like it, doesn't mean you agree with it, but you say, this is the current state of things. So what I would tell parents is there's many things that are outside of your control. Set up some goalposts for yourself. So my kids are going to go to school and I'm going to accept them going to school unless this happens, right? So then every day is not a constant, like, should we pull the kids from school? Should we do something different? Should I be calling the principal? You know that there's things that are upsetting to you, you accept them. And then if you hit a threshold, then you know, okay, we are now going to make a different decision. What this does is it takes you out of the daily back and forth of being upset about something that you can't control anyway, and kind of fighting with yourself about, is this the right decision? Should we be doing something different? I know it's hard to know what those goalposts are, if it's a certain number of cases in a school, or if a school says, no, we're going all remote and you want your kids to be in person. All of those are very personal decisions that are based on a particular family. But knowing kind of what are your trigger points and setting up those goalposts for yourself. And then in the meantime, when that difficult stuff comes up, taking that deep breath and saying, this is not something I can control, even though I don't like it. And so I'm going to let things be for now.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's great. I think we've all realized that we might agree or disagree with our coworkers and our friends and stuff we used to always agree on through the pandemic. And so it's good to just set those for yourself. So I think those were good tips. So like I said, transitioning to some anxiety questions for youth themselves. Any coping techniques or advice for kids, I guess, and or parents experiencing separation anxiety going back to school after being home for a while and or over the summer?
So the first thing I usually tell parents is you want to offer a lot of support to your kids without making it worse. Our natural instinct is when our kids feel anxious to try to get rid of that anxiety as fast as we can. And that sometimes that is not the most helpful thing. So acknowledging that anxiety is normal and it's okay for your kids to experience some level of anxiety, that helps them become resilient people. It helps them learn how to regulate the emotions. So as a parent, you never want to see your kids suffer, and also knowing this is normal and it's okay for my kid to be struggling through this. So first of all, know that. Secondly, there are some things you can do to help that when your kid is struggling through this, how do they get through it in a way where they feel capable of doing so? So I really encourage families to practice breathing and relaxation techniques at home. There's a few very important caveats to how to do this. If you get online and Google paced breathing for kids or progressive muscle relaxation for kids or teens, there are tons of great resources that you can get on YouTube or online to take you through these different activities. But I would encourage parents, especially if you have an anxious kid, to practice paced breathing or progressive muscle relaxation once a day or at least 3 to 5 times a week. Now, the caveat is this: you only practice these techniques with your children when they're calm. You never do it when they're anxious. And you need to practice it for 2 or 3 weeks, because what you're doing is you're actually building, it's called our parasympathetic response. We're making that stronger in our children's bodies when they practice it again and again. That's their natural calming response. And if you do that over several weeks when they're calm, it will finally be strong enough when they are anxious that it's going to be helpful. One of the mistakes that a lot of us make is, I'm in a really difficult situation, so I've heard that breathing is going to be helpful. But what ends up happening is I'm anxious. I start breathing and doing it for the very first time. It's a new skill. My body doesn't have that strong muscle developed in my parasympathetic system. And so it doesn't work. And people think, oh, this doesn't work, or it gets paired with anxiety. So the next time I try to deep breathe, it actually makes me anxious. So give yourself some grace. If you've tried this for the first time while you're anxious, that's okay. You can go back and reprogram.
Everybody probably has.
We do it, but just start with your kid and just try to do it 3 to 5 times a week. If you can do it daily, cool. I'm a parent. I don't do anything daily consistently with my kid. So 3 to 5 times a week, try to do it for just 2 to 3 minutes. In 2 to 3 weeks later, your kid will have an excellent coping skill that will actually help with their anxiety. So that's why I say weather the storm, because it's going to take a couple of weeks and they might be anxious through that. But over time, that's going to be really helpful because I can guarantee you this isn't the only transition they'll probably experience this year.
That's great. I know we kind of touched on these a little bit, but anything else you could add to the conversation about? I know I personally have a lot of friends that are having their first kid go to kindergarten. Mm-hmm. So are these kind of techniques you can do with kindergartners, like ages I mean, if they're that young, or are there anything else you can help prepare them for other than what we've already talked about?
You can absolutely do this with kindergartners, and parents might be familiar with things like smell the flower, blow out the candle. It's a really easy one for kids that help with the breathing, or have them pretend they have lemons in their hands and squeeze them, and that helps with kicking their body into relaxation. The other thing that helps with kindergartners is develop a ritual for transition drop-off times. And so sometimes, ideally it's great if, hey, I can hand you off to a teacher or an aide. Schools are very busy. Oftentimes that's not the case. So being able to make one or two friends and that they become part of the drop-off routine, that we drop off together, or you have this friend here and you're going to stand and wait and meet them, and then we go in together. That's a way that your child has somebody else there as a support and a comfort that can be incredibly helpful. Additionally, just having a little bit of like fun right before the drop-off. So with my kids, they have a construction site right outside their school. So we go and look at the crane every day and we say, hey, crane, we're going to school. And then we have like a little handshake we do that is our goodbye to each other. And we consistently do that every day, and it helps kids get ready and prepare for those transitions. Again, there's no magic bullet. So at first it could look rocky, but just consistently keep with it. And that's something that actually helps kids quite a bit.
Okay, great. Transitioning slightly, I know mental health is a hot topic across the board right now, but how, as a parent, can you take an active role in improving your child's mental health?
Mm-hmm. So a couple of different things that parents can do. First of all, just do regular check-ins with your kids about how their mental health is. And this can look a lot of different ways, but I encourage parents to at least once a week ask just, like, what are you struggling with right now? What problem are you having that you're not sure how to solve? And then, what are the things you're grateful for or going well in your life? If you can do that daily, that's great. But just having an open-ended conversation that invites your kids to think about both the positive things and the difficult things. Kids a lot of times need that space to know, like, I'm going to be asked about this. So if something is gnawing on me, I am going to be able to talk about it in that space. And then when your kids come to you and they start talking about their problems, as parents, we have a real tendency to want to it's called the righting reflex, immediately tell them it's going to be okay. It's not that big of a deal, or this is how you deal with it. Instead, to really help your kids' mental health, validate how they're feeling. Acknowledge that it makes sense why they're afraid, or they're frustrated, or they're angry. And basically that gives them permission to know, like, it's okay for me to feel the feelings that I am. It's okay for me to talk about them. So that's kind of like the first step of helping your child's mental health. And then the second step of helping your kids' mental health, and I talked a little bit about this before, but the foundation of good mental health and physical health is making sure they're getting adequate sleep, that they're eating their 3 meals a day with snacks in between, and that they're getting enough water. So most of our kids are dehydrated, and we actually regulate emotions pretty poorly when we're dehydrated. So making sure that they have a water bottle with them when they're going to school, giving them rewards when they get their water bottle, drink during the day, making it a fun thing. But those are small things that actually make it a lot easier for kids to regulate their emotions well. And when they have those skills, that really helps pump up their mental health.
Okay. Well, thanks for all those tips. Is there anything that we missed on mental health or anxiety that you want to touch on before do some last follow-up questions?
I guess one of the other things I didn't say is the importance of your kids feeling positive emotions during the day. So when we have a lot of different positive emotions, we feel that brings up our resiliency tank. So thinking about ways that your kids not just like experiencing happiness, but that they can experience joy and wonderment and awe and delight. So having family routines where you do fun things together, like a game night or a movie night, are, as a tradition that's a regular thing, can help with that. Additionally, get your kids outside. Such an important part of protecting their mental health. And we know that kids, when they get outside, and adults as well, their stress goes down. There is that chance to have that wonderment and awe of the world. And just that outside time, we know it helps reduce behavior problems. It increases attention. And overall, it helps your kids sleep better. So in general, we want at least 30 minutes of outside time a day. I know it's hard when the weather isn't great, or it's, the health index is like, don't go outside or else you're gonna like collapse.
All the smoke,
But to the extent that you can, and even in the wintertime, like bundle your kids up. it's one of the best things you can absolutely do for their mental health is get them outside 30 minutes a day.
And that's probably outside of recess at school. Is this at home as
This
a
is at
family
home.
or? Okay.
Yeah, this is at home. This is as a family in a community. So this is outside of school stuff.
Okay, great. I mean, I know when I go outside, it makes a world of a difference. So I could see how that would help. So transitioning just a little bit for the last couple questions. We know that with being remote and all the transitions and changes that happened last year, a lot of students have fallen behind in school. How do you keep them motivated, but most importantly, encourage that, it's okay to be behind, but let's keep learning, just kind of stuff along those lines?
Yeah, so is a couple of things that I would encourage parents. As a reminder, rewards always work better to shape and motivate behavior than punishment. So have your kids have something to work toward. And so, like if you work on your homework every night for 30 minutes, at the end of the week, you get to choose what we're going to have for dinner on Saturday or Sunday. Or you get to choose the movie. And it doesn't always have to be buying your kid a toy. It can be just giving them a little bit more choice and autonomy. Or, instead of doing this chore, you get 30 minutes of Fortnite. So really, really utilize rewards. And kind of around the second point that I'm already speaking to, we know that it's very helpful to focus on the process and not the outcome for children. There's a lot of research. It's called growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Carol Dweck is a psychologist who's researched this for 20 years. But we know that kids have better long-term outcomes when we focus on the effort that they're putting in, and that skills can be learned over time if you put in hard work versus you kind of are born with it. And kids with a fixed mindset, they tend not to try as hard because they think either I'm good at math or I'm not. That people are smart or they're not, that you either will get good grades or you're just kind of going to be behind. So really stop saying things like, if you get all A's, I'm going to give you this. And again, that's not if you've done that before, you're not a bad person, you're not a bad parent. However, there's a more effective way to do it, which is if you consistently complete all your assignments or every night you sit down and you do your homework, this is the reward you get. So reward the hard work, let go of the outcome, because what ends up happening is if a kid puts in a lot of effort and the outcome isn't what they expected, they're more likely than to either give up or start doing things like cheating or focusing on just trying to get the outcome rather than the process. So focus on the growth mindset. Ask them rather than about their grades, what did they learn from an experience? How are they going to study differently, knowing how the outcome happened? And just really, really start there rather than with the outcome.
Okay. Kind of on a similar note, there's tons of distractions right now too. Is there any tips to kind of keep them focused and kind of look past COVID if they can?
Yeah, this is so hard. A lot of times I will talk to kids about, like, what can you control and what can't you control? And sometimes even if you have a really stressed out kid, there's a really good technique. This is from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. We've got something that's called our, circle of concern, and the smaller circle is our area of influence. And so sometimes even sitting down with your kids and saying, what are all the things that you're worried about right now? And a lot of those things are things that affect us, but we can't do anything about. And so then instead, what is everything that we can actually focus on? So really help your kids think about what they can focus on. With teenagers I work with, you can focus on your bedtime routine. You can focus on the food you put in your body. You can focus on who you follow. You can focus on how you talk to yourself. Those are things you can actually control in your life. So to the extent possible, help your kids sort that out and ask them what they're doing with the things they can control. And then just take breaks from talking about all the stuff they can't control. Sometimes, we talk about having technology-free zones at dinner tables. I really encourage families to have pandemic-free zones in their routines, where we just don't talk about that stuff. Instead, we just talk about like what's going on with us. And I know that's super hard at times, but it can be really helpful to take that break.
Okay. A lot of these tips I know we're talking about for youth, but I feel like we can apply them to our day-to-day life too.
Yeah, definitely.
So goal setting, do you have like an idea of realistic goals for this year for like an elementary school kid, a middle school kid, and or a high school kid?
This is a hard one to say globally because it is very dependent on how your kid did last year. So part of this is thinking about where did my child end off at? A couple of things I would say as a parent, let go of grades, especially for your kids who are making big transitions. So your kids are going to high school or into elementary to middle school. Let go of grades for like the first month. They're not that important. Instead, like the goal is for them to consistently attend school and develop a routine that they are consistently following. So they're taking their books to class, they're taking their backpack, they're coming home, they're doing their homework, they're going to bed on time. That's the goal, is just to get them back into the swing of things. And honestly, that's a big thing. You think about like when you start a new job, you're not going to like immediately jump in and be great at it. Part of it is just learning like, where's the bathroom? And is it okay for me to like, take lunch at this time? And, like these different forms, like how do I organize things? Your kids need the same grace. So that's kind of the initial goal. And then the second goal is, are they putting in the time? Are they asking for help where they're struggling? That's kind of the second goal. And then from there, you can work with teachers to determine what is reasonable in terms of academic attainment for my kids. Some kids didn't lose a step. Online learning worked really well for them. And so once they transition back, they might be just fine. Other kids really lost 6 months to a year of learning. And for those kids, they might need extra support. And I think as a parent, it's okay if your kid doesn't fully catch up this year. There's a lot of time for kids to catch up if we give them that space and that structure, but just keep oversight and support on them. So those are kind of what I would say in terms of goals.
Okay, that makes sense. Kind of adapted to each kid and where they're at. And I guess the last question, I know you touched on resiliency a little bit, but just how parents can keep building resiliency in children and our future generation.
Yeah, so resiliency is a skill that can be learned and developed over time. And so, again, there are several things that go with resiliency. So remember, the foundation is going to be the sleep, the diet, the food. On top of that is going to be the positive interactions. And then from there, you really want to focus with your kids on developing problem-solving skills. And helping them see that, there are always going to be challenges. And so how do we adapt to those challenges? How do we either fix this, or how do we move around this, or how do we flow with it? So having those conversations, like I said before, like what problems are you dealing with? How do you think that we can, deal with this problem? So for our older kids, a lot of times it's like, what is the problem? The problem solving steps. What are possible solutions? Which one has like the best benefit? Let's give it a try and let's see how it goes. With younger kids, I use this with my 3.5-year-old all the time. I wonder about this thing. What if we tried this? And then let's do it. So I wonder, what if, let's try. And even at a very young age, when kids are struggling with something, don't just come in and fix it. Have them think through, how can you deal with this? How are you going to adapt to it? And let them have a chance to do that. And developing those skills is like a very important part of developing resiliency.
Great. Well, this was all super valuable information, I think. Is there anything else you want to add, or do you think covered most of it?
A recent poll came out from the Children's Hospital in Chicago that it was, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but it was somewhere like around 70 to 75% of parents felt some level of guilt about how they've dealt with the pandemic with their kids, that they wish they would have given them more support, or that they should have paid more attention to their mental health. So I guess what I want to just say is, like, as a parent, give yourself some grace, even through an incredibly difficult situation. Kids are absolutely going to struggle, because everybody has struggled. And rather than spending a lot of time in guilt or worried about like, how do I do this right for my kid, just kind of like this consistently checking in and adapting based on what situation is in front of you. Like, just be patient with yourself. Know that a lot of parents feel like they're not showing up as their best selves. And that's okay. Giving yourself that grace and taking care of yourself as a person is probably one of the most important things you can do for your kids.
That's great. I think we all could learn from that for sure. So, well, thank you so much, Dr. Glover. That was, like I said, it was great information. If this is the first time you've joined us for a speaker series or aren't familiar with our health huddle, we do have 3 pillars: sport performance, mental health, and healthy habits. So there's plenty of information on our website. And we will also link Children's Hospital of Colorado has a great blog with some more in-depth Q&As on heading back to school. So we will link that on our website page as well. So thank you so much, and hopefully we'll catch you at one of our next events.